Now we will try to answer the fourth question in this exam, which is for order tracking. And in here we are tasked with writing two independent functions, each solving a different retail related problem. We do not have to call the function, we only have to implement it. So the first function is log underscore order, and it has two parameters. One is called item, the second is called quantity with a default value of 1. So this function logs an item order in a shopping system. It takes two parameters. The first is a string, the second is about how many units were ordered of that item. It also has to print the message order logged, quantity units of item, which are both passed to it as parameters. The function does not return anything, so we need to remember that as well. Let's start implementing this before we read about the second function. So we define this function log underscore order, and the parameters are item, comma, quantity equals 1. And first of all, we need to validate the item that it must be a non-empty string and it must be a positive integer, obviously, because the quantity cannot be negative. So for the item a parameter that is passed to it, we will check that it is an instance of the string data type. And if it is not, or it turns out to be an empty string, then we need to raise the error, or rather print the error. And simply return. If not, if we move forward, then we need to check the type of, or the data type of the quantity item. And it must be an integer, and it must be a positive integer. So if it is less than 0 or it is not an integer, then again we will print quantity must be a positive integer, and then return. If we pass both of these if conditions without any problems, then we move to the next stage where we have to print, and we'll format that. So what we need to print is that order logged quantity units of item. So first let's get this here and we paste it here. However, we cannot use these signs to have the quantity variable in here within curly braces, and the item variable within curly braces as well. So we are printing order logged quantity units of item. That's for all for the first function. Now let's take a look at the second function. And the second function is, rather let's first check whether whether the first function is correct. So you made a mistake here. This is item dot strip. And we passed all the checks, so now we can move on to the second function, which is has order been placed. Log and item are two parameters that will be passed to it. So let's define this function here. And this function checks whether an item has been ordered. It takes two parameters, log, which is a list of strings representing previously ordered items, for example, apples and bananas. And the second parameter is item, which is a string representing the item to search for. The function should return true if the item is in the log, otherwise false. And looking at some sample runs, log equals apples, bananas, oranges. And when this function is called, with log and bananas, it returns true. Now remember that we do not have to, we only have to implement the questions. We do not have to call these functions or write any other code related to that. So let's start now. Now in here, well, at the end, we will have to return whether the item is in the log or not. But before that, we need to run some validation checks. We need to check that it is a list. So if it is not of oh, log needs to be of type list. Then again, we will simply print that error log must be a list of strings. And then we will return false. Also, we need to validate that all of the values within the list are strings. Then they are not a mixture of some other data types. So if not all of the items, instance of the string type for each x in log. And here we are using list comprehension. So we will print an error log must only contain strings. And since there was an error, so we will return false. The next thing to check is to validate the second variable that was the second parameter that was passed to this function, and that is item. And that needs to be a non-empty string. So if not is instance, this is the function we are using, and we'll pass it the parameter item, and the data type it will check against is string, or item dot strip is equal to an empty string. Then we will print the error item must be a non-empty string, and return false. Only when all of these if conditions are false and none of these error messages are printed, then we will return the item in log. We will check, this will check whether the item that is passed as a second parameter exists in the log that was passed as the first parameter, and this will return a value of either true or false, which will then be returned from the function. So let's check whether this is true. whether we have passed all the test cases or not. Oh, so here we seem to have made another mistake, a typo, and let's check it again. And the checks have been passed. So that is it for question number 4, which is about two functions for order tracking.